Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast. And today I'm so excited for you to meet Josh Ketry. We met the other day at a networking event. He is a part of Buffalo in so many ways. He's part of the Buffalo Riverworks, Pearl Street Brewing, Buffalo United Martial Arts, Swarm Academy Collective, Intelligence Training Center, I Love Buffalo podcast, and the Fight Family LLC. And today we are going to deep dive into how groups of people can solve problems better than individuals using collective intelligence. And I loved this topic just because, unfortunately, I was not always good at asking for help. I was not always good at being vulnerable and showing what I didn't know. I didn't like to ask questions in class when I was growing up as a kid because I didn't want to look like I didn't know something. I didn't want to, as an adult, necessarily bring people in when it came to solving my problems because I thought it meant I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough, and that I had to figure it all out by myself. And being that lone wolf, not even a play on my last name, unfortunately, is part of what led me into my own burnout. And so Josh and I started talking about this, and I was like, you know what? Let's unpack this on the podcast. So thank you so much, Josh, for joining me today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Danielle. This is great. I checked out your podcast. I listened to a couple episodes, and they were both right up my alley. One was about authenticity, which I think is huge because really, I view life as a quest to find your authentic self. That's kind of what I view it now. And I didn't always view it that way. And it's hard to do your authentic self because there's so many blocks in the way that you put up yourself, right? So that was a really good one. And the other one you had on was about collaboration, which is really right up my alley. And collaborating to solve problems is something that I kind of came into backwards. So like a lot of people might, purposely try to study that. I didn't. I got put in charge of a large system of people at a young age and read a book called The Starfish and the Spider, The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. And it's, it gives you all these examples of organizations with no leaders that just are super powerful and hard to stop, but they're often disorganized and they don't have direction. So it's like this catch-22. And so what I decided to do was make my own position kind of leaderless. I decentralized my own leadership. And instead of telling everyone what to do, because I didn't know what to do, the only reason I got put in charge of the system was because they trusted me. And so I went to my first meeting basically, and I handed out questionnaires. I said, if you guys had my job, and there's about 40 employees, I guess, underneath me there. I said, if you guys had my job, why don't you list the top 5 things you would do? And they did that. And I organized them and then let everybody vote on it. And then I fought for the top 3 things. And those top 3 things, it worked really, really well. And my bosses were like, well, that was brilliant, Josh. You're amazing. And I was like, I didn't do anything. I just asked the crowd what to do. And they told me what to do. And they're like, we don't care. Give us more ideas. And so then I did that more. And then we got more ideas. And some of the ideas like ownership and the management had already been talking about, and it reaffirmed their decisions. It wasn't like all brand new stuff, but some of it was totally brand new stuff. And this was like a restaurant brewery at, at Pearl Street in my department. But there were some very interesting and fascinating case studies that came out of our little department. There's 40 people. It ended up growing and growing. And at one point, the whole company-wide, had 550 employees. It just kept growing. And we did, pretty much all of our problem solving now, even among the manager group or among the employees or anyone, is done in groups. And we try to really listen to the group. There's been quite a few case studies that came out of our little group that are really interesting. My favorite story to tell probably is in the very beginning. This was probably like 2006. I had already done it a few times. I asked the crowd for, what they would do. I asked the employees, And the customers too. We had like, surveys for the customers, but the employees, they have more skin in the game than the customers do, and they're
Mhm.
more attentive to the problems that are actually happening in the system. And what the one suggestion that came out from a host, and she had only worked for us for about 4 weeks, so it wasn't like some expert in restaurant management or anything like that. She said, "Hey, we used to have these little pagers at the host stand, and when you come in and get on the wait list, we'd hand you a little pager." And you'd walk around wherever you wanted, and we'd page you when your table was ready. Well, we kept losing them. People would walk off with them, and we lost hundreds of them, and it was very expensive. And I asked the crowd, like, "Hey, how do we solve this problem?" And the one girl that worked there for 4 weeks or whatever, she's like, "Why don't we get a cell phone at the host stand, and we'll write people's phone numbers down, and then we'll text them when their table's ready." And I was like, "That's kind of cool." So I asked ownership if we could buy a cell phone. And at first they're like, no, not yet. And so I used my cell phone, which was like a flip phone. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but like there used to be a thing called T9 where when you want
Mhm.
to text someone, you had to hit each number like 3 times for
Yes.
each letter, right? Well,
Mhm.
that's a phone that I had, right? And so I used my T9 phone at the host stand. People would walk in, we'd write down their numbers, and we'd text them the letter R because we didn't want to write a whole sentence because it was T9. The letter R when your table's ready. And it just so happened a gentleman from New York City that was a tech programmer came in and said, "Hey, I can build this on the iPad for you guys. Why don't we do that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a cool idea." And this gives you like a little bit of a date of how long ago it was. It was iPad version 2 was the one that we
Mhm.
had, and we built this app on there. It was called Cake, like eat your cake. And we built the app and we spent about a year like working the bugs out. And our place is so busy. Pearl Street's like 3 floors,
Yeah.
patios inside, all this stuff, that it was a really good case study because there's a lot of problems. So we added all these buttons and all this stuff. Well, it turns out that Cake gets bought and gets bought again and gets bought by Open Table, which is the one that everyone uses now. But the
Yeah.
format is pretty much the one that we came up with. It lived on, and the idea came from the crowd. The idea came
Wow.
from a girl that worked with us for 4 weeks. So it's not that we were the only ones working on solving this problem. This happens a lot when there's a problem. A lot of people in the world will start working on solving it, but we really focused on using the group to help solve the bugs and the idea. We didn't think of the idea because we saw it somewhere. We thought of the idea. The girl just thought of it, and then it turned out that other people did too. But ours ended up. I mean, I should have quit Pearl Street then and bought into Open Table because that's a
Yeah.
billion with a B dollar business. That's a big, huge business. But to me, I was like, wow, that really worked really well. But there were a lot of ideas that at least the crowd reaffirmed, if not came up with themselves, including like our top selling menu items came not from a chef, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, from the employees saying, "Hey, put fish tacos on the menu, do this, do that," and those idea changing banquet rooms, adding patios, a lot of those ideas that were really big ideas were either reaffirmed by the crowd or came directly from the crowd. So it came to a point where I was talking to the crowd hundreds of times, and every time I talk to the crowd, they're not infallible. Like they can still make mistakes. It just there was way, way, way less mistakes than if you just trusted all of your decision making to one person.
No, I love the examples that you gave. I love just how tangible you can see that it's not necessarily turning over control. I think people think collective intelligence, using others to solve problems means you give up that control, but it's more about everyone being a contributor, not you having any less power or less say, which I think does make the whole process stronger from the way I'm hearing it. And I like the way it's not even about giving anyone an extra job. It's about giving them the freedom to be a participant. And I think it sounds like it's freeing for you, it's freeing for them. There's just so many benefits to it that just, yeah, I like the idea of it. How, just curiously, are there any kind of then non-business applications that you've ever used that kind of system or format with?
Oh, there's a lot of non-business applications. I mean, it's hard to find an application that has absolutely nothing to do with business, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a couple of things that I now I'm full-fledged studying this, and I'm looking around the world, and there's only a couple people studying it. And so there's like MIT, and they study it to predict the stock market. And that's all that they seem to use it for. And then there's Dr. Rosenberg, who's a famous person who started using technology to enhance it in like 2017. But he's also using it for predictive markets, a lot for gambling. But right now he's kind of getting away from that. And I've been talking to him a lot. He's using it for like he's using a kind called conversational collective intelligence, which is pretty simple. Like
Mhm.
you and I right now are doing conversational collective intelligence. There's two of us together. Two is
Mhm.
better than one if we're solving a problem and we have a goal, right? So you can use collective intelligence for all kinds of stuff. You can ask your family, what do you guys want to go for dinner, and decide as a
Yeah.
group. It's pretty simple. You can do, but I use collective. I got really sick at one point. I had autoimmune problems. I was off
Mhm.
balance. I couldn't see. I couldn't drive. I couldn't train jujitsu. All of these things were making my life very miserable. And I found someone that cured their autoimmune problems with diet. I went into a room online and just started telling my symptoms, and everyone started sharing back with me, try this, try that. And so I sought out people who had already cured the symptoms of MS and off balance, all this stuff. I tried what they suggested and it worked. And
Mhm.
I don't have symptoms at all anymore, you know? So, and that was a big, a diet change where I basically eliminated everything from my diet. And these kinds of things, you can use collective intelligence for all things. This is the way I look at it now. I like to describe in two ways. First of all, if you take 10 brains and put them together, let's you imagine you picture those brains working in a room together, and each
Mhm.
brain weighs 1 pound. If you can assemble them the right way, those 10 brains become a new brain that's bigger than all the rest, that kind of floats above the other ones.
Mhm.
And it doesn't weigh just 10 pounds, it weighs 100 pounds. It's like 10x or more because each person becomes like a node in a brain. Like
Mhm.
I look at it like on this planet for billions of years, there was single celled organisms. And then one day they decided to work together somehow. It's almost like magic. And they make, complex organisms like plants, animals, and me and you. Well, when you put people together, they make this new being, this new thing. And when I was part of any collective intelligence group that was really going strong, that had a lot of trust, because trust matters. So if you have
Yeah.
high trust between each other in the group and you can build that trust, it becomes a new thing. So, like the Navy SEALs, they make a very high trust team out of 10 people, right? How? Why? Well, they trust each other, right? So, you can use collective intelligence for all different kinds of things, but I like to think of it as a new brain, a new
Mhm.
thing, a new entity, a new being almost. And there's a book called What's Our Problem by Tim
Mhm.
Urban. And he describes groups of people like this as genies, like a magic genie, like a rubber lamp. It comes out, and you make a wish. And these genies can do amazing things. They can change skylines, they can put satellites into space, they can cure diseases, they can end suffering, end evil. They can do all kinds of things when they work together. Human collaboration is arguably, I actually believe, like, not even arguably, I haven't seen a better argument for anything else, is the most powerful force in the known universe
Mhm.
outside of entropy, because human collaboration can solve all the problems that don't defy the laws of physics, right? Anything that you see today that's amazing, like a plane in the sky, 300 years ago was magic, right? And that was
Yeah.
solved by human collaboration and layers of it. So one person discovers one thing, another person discovers another thing. Now, had we had the technology to work together in real time, you probably would have been able to solve these problems a lot faster. And there, like you said, there's a lot of tangible tests that have been done where you can test groups of people versus individuals and see who solves problems better. And the
Mhm.
groups of people, if the system is right and there's trust and all the ingredients are needed, it really can't be beat by an individual, maybe for one question, but over a long period of time with many iterations, the group is almost always smarter.
Yeah. And I love that you keep saying the word trust. That, I think a lot of times people just get together with people or they ask for opinions from people that they don't necessarily have that trust piece. And then they wonder why the information isn't aligned, why they don't maybe buy into it, why they don't feel like collaboration was the right thing because it was missing that trust element. And so it's not just about talking and sharing ideas and getting people's opinion. That trust piece, I think, is so critical because of the collaborativeness of the fact that you're sharing not only this problem solving, but you're sharing the solution and you're going to be impacted by it. And without that trust, you're never going to be happy with the outcome.
Yeah, the trust, we could get into a whole podcast about trust because there's two kinds of trust when it comes to collective intelligence. The first is trust in your system that you're using.
Mhm.
And if you look around the world right now and I asked you, Daniela, list 10 systems you trust, you're going to have a problem with it. You're going to say, like,
Mhm.
government, no, media, Food,
Right.
like what systems do you trust? Those are all systems.
Right.
Family's a system, religion's a system, education's those are all systems. If
Hmm.
you tell me the systems that govern over your life, I can pretty accurately predict your quality of life. There's no more important determining factor for quality of life than there is systems. People that were leaving their country to come to America weren't coming here for the land or for the people or for anything else except for the system. They wanted to live under a better system. So that's how
Hmm.
important systems are, that people are willing to uproot their whole lives to find better systems to live under. And once you understand that, then you look at systems like, okay, uh, what's the problem with most of our systems? Why are they lacking trust? Well, there's two major reasons. One is lack of transparency. So any
Hmm.
system, so in my businesses, as much as I'm allowed to. So if I own the business, I do it very extreme. If I'm part of a business, I'll fight for it as much as I can. I want my system very transparent. I want my employees, for the most part, to kind of get a pretty accurate feeling for how much I make. And in the very beginning, I told everyone like how much I made and everything. When we hit the pandemic, I got a lot of pushback because we didn't do so good in the pandemic, and people didn't
Hmm.
want, advertising about how much money we were losing and things like that because it was a tough time. But when the very beginning, when I first took over, I didn't care. I was like, guys, I make $9 an hour. I was used to be a
Hmm.
server and a bartender making $200 a night. Help me solve these problems, please, so I can make more than
Hmm.
$9 an hour. And I built trust with them, though. They were like, okay, we will help you solve problems.
Hmm.
But they can also have trust because they have skin in the game too. Like if a restaurant succeeds, then everyone succeeds, right? Because
Right.
they get 15 to 20% of, we bring in $1 million, they get 20%. The servers and bussers and bartenders, If
Hmm.
we bring in $100 million, you get $20 million to split up. So it's kind of easy to build that trust because they directly make a percentage. But
Hmm.
trust in a system is based on transparency and results. Okay. Trust between people is different. So trust between me and you is really only built one way that I can tell. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've studied it a lot. I've written about it a lot. And trust is built usually with vulnerability, reciprocated
Hmm.
with effort. So it doesn't have to be reciprocated exactly. Like let's say I needed money. And I was like, Danielle, can you lend me $500? And you're like, okay, I'll be vulnerable with you. Here's $500. You give me $500. Okay. Now I start to pay you back a little bit at a time. And then all of a sudden I run into bad luck. My car crashes. My wife leaves me. This is horrible, but like some
Yeah.
bad things like happen to me, right? And you see I'm still making an effort. You could still trust me and say, listen, you don't got to pay me back, Josh. It's okay. I see you're going through this stuff. It didn't necessarily ruin our trust because my effort was still there. So I
Right.
think effort is more important than actual total reciprocation in
Hmm.
every single node. But if there was a way to quantify it, which some people do, like Amazon, eBay, Etsy, they qualify peer-to-peer trust. And that peer-to-peer trust is quantified by previous iterations. I sold you something and then I leave a review for you and you say, okay, this was a good product or whatever. You stood behind your product. And you can have trust in a person you're buying from a stranger on the internet and you trust that person. Well, the same thing is true with collective intelligence. If you're doing it with a bunch of strangers that you don't know, they're not going to really care to help you solve a problem usually, unless that problem either affects them or they
Hmm.
have skin in the game. So if you're trying to organize collective intelligence at home or do it on your own, I would start with just a group of your friends, but like basically define what it is that you're doing. You know what I mean? Say, hey, we're trying to solve problem X, and you can do this with
Right.
just your friends at home because those are people you already trust, right?
Hmm.
But trust is a deep hole here, but it is required, especially in the system. So the system, but that's easy to solve the system problem. You know?
Yeah. Well, and I like the way you talk about too, it's not just about reciprocation, but it's about that effort and intention. And I love always talking about intention because I think so many times we think, it has to be just perfect and it has to be done right, or we have to know all the answers already. But I think sometimes just having the right intention, the right mindset when we're coming into a situation, the right kind of sincerity about it is where a lot of the benefits can come from as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to have the key a key. Uh, Everything I talk about here is kind of like some conjecture because I look at collective intelligence as a new realm of science. Okay. I
Hmm.
fell into it backwards and I started looking around this room going, wait a second, this is actually real and testable. And if it's testable, that means it's science. Okay. So if you can test it, and then it's science. So there have been a lot of really interesting tests done with collective intelligence, and it always pretty much comes up the same way that yes, groups of people are smarter than individuals, They are wiser than individuals. They're more creative than individuals. They're more empathetic. But the top end of a group isn't any higher than a top end of an individual. So any individual could create anything that a group can create. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah.
So, but when you put the group together, the chances of getting there quicker increases by a lot. The speed of creativity increases a lot. Why? There's a bunch of reasons, but your ego gets in the way a lot. People's egos
Hmm.
get in the way a lot. So, like, if I'm a leader of something and everyone's got to listen to me and I make a decision, it's very hard for me to go back on that decision if I told everyone to do it. But if I ask the group, hey guys, what do you want to do? And the whole group comes to a certain kind of consensus and we say, hey, let's do this. And I say, okay, let's do that. They're going to defend that idea a lot more. Their egos
Hmm.
are going to get out of the way. And if it's not working, they're not going to like, it's not going to hurt anyone's feelings to go, oh, let's stop this. Let's change directions. So you become quicker to adapt to problems, quicker to switch problems. When things aren't working, there's no egos in the way. And there
Right.
are egos like during the process when you're solving problems, there are things that can get in the way. So small groups is okay. Just like I know you. Let's say you called me up and you had a problem. I could link you up with like let's do a swarm of 12 of us. We'll help you try to solve your problem. That's no problem. But when the group gets big, like big enough, you run into problems with labels. So if I'm
Right.
like, even like being a boy or a girl, you want diversity in the group. So before you solve the problem, the best kind of diversity, and this is testable, is you want a heavy mix of females and males together. This is
Hmm.
absolutely 100% like there's never been a test that's shown the opposite. And I find that the same thing with mine. Like I would like diversity of opinion, and a good start to do that is diversity with men and women mixed together because their opinions are going to be different about things. They approach things differently. But then when you put them together, you really do come out with these super awesome and interesting answers, right? So
Hmm.
diversity and matter and labels can be problems in groups, especially if that group has a lot of power. So like
Hmm.
if you have talking about government, which I'm very interested in fixing corruption in government. Um, the problem with labels is that even like Republican left, all the labels, all of them, is that you are going to start to answer your question based on your label, not on the idea. And
Hmm.
what happens in groups is I'm sure you've heard of groups that do horrible things, bad things like groupthink
Right.
or echo chambers or tyranny. Well, all those, witch hunts, Nazis, all those things started with labels. What's a witch
Right.
hunt? You started with the label the witch. Or what is Nazis? You started with the label of we're Nazis and you're not us, and we're going to put you in concentration camps and all these things. Labels are required to divide those groups. But if you take a big like if I was going to ask a million people a question, everyone would disappear on this on the technology on the app, and you would just be your answer, your idea. And
Hmm.
so therefore your idea has to stand alone without labels, and then you avoid all these perils can be found in groups sometimes. So in the book I was telling you about earlier, Tim
Hmm.
Urban's book, he says groups of people that can do amazing things are called genies.
Right.
Well, the ones that do awful things, he calls them golems. And he draws all these cute little like characters in his book. But the golems look like, these big mean monsters. And then the genies are amazing. So why is it that sometimes humans can make amazing genies that like change the world and help people,
Yeah.
and other times they make golems that hurt people? And so that's what I dove into the study of that really deeply to try to figure out if we can make genies more consistently. And I'm feeling very optimistic that we can. So.
Yeah. No, I love all of this. This is such an amazing like topic in science. And I know there's so many different like rabbit holes to go into with it and directions it can go in. If someone was listening, I was like, all right, Josh, I need to learn more about this. Where can they find out more? Obviously, there's so many different places to learn. I know we had talked about one of
Sure. I would start, there's a TED Talk by Dr. Rosenberg from 2017. And this TED Talk, look up collective swarm intelligence, like a swarm of bees. And that
hmm.
word has a negative connotation, kind of. Some people get like the idea of hive mind, but hive mind to me is groupthink, which is the opposite of
Hmm.
swarming. So if you look up swarm intelligence and Dr. Rosenberg, he does a TED Talk where he takes a collective intelligence system and he takes 20 horse racing fans. He just picks them at random, and they are told each person on their own to pick the superfecta of the Kentucky Derby. And if you're not aware of horse racing, the superfecta is the first four horses in a row. It
Hmm.
is really hard to do. to pick those first four horses in a row. A $20 bet got $11,400. He does this live, and a woman from Newsweek is reporting on the story. She bets $20. She wins $11,400 because it wins. The group as a whole, together, working together, they correctly predict the superfecta of the Kentucky Derby, but not a single individual inside the group did it correctly on their own. So
Right.
this they got a little lucky here because if you repeated this a million times, like more than half the time, it's not going to work out. But the swarm or the group is going to be way more likely to solve the problem than individuals. But these are fixed inputs, right? These are just like we know there's 8 horses in the race or whatever. It's multiple choice. The best way that groups work together is creative problem solving. So I
Hmm.
ask a group like, "Hey guys, what do you think we could do? How do you solve this problem?" And each person in the group answers on their own, and then we play a game, almost like an economy game where we have tokens and we decide what our favorite ideas are, and those ideas go to each round. And you could literally ask the whole world a question and get one interesting and creative answer from the whole world in maybe an hour of playing a game
Hmm.
because the iterations go pretty fast, like depending on like how much time you have spent. So I would check out that TED Talk. That is one thing I would check out. Dr. Rosenberg, Swarm Intelligence. We have a website called swarmacademy.ai. It's not
Hmm.
real AI. This is people coming together to form a new being, and we consider that a new form of intelligence, and we just put it under the AI category to gather attention. I kind of wish we didn't right now, but that's where it is. So swarmacademy.ai. And it has nothing to do with language model AI. It has only to do with creative, loving people solving problems together. That's the difference between regular AI and collective intelligence is that, first of all, like one of the tests we did is this. We did a test where you're diagnosing patients. Okay. Individual doctors diagnose patients, and then language model AI diagnosed the same patients. And then we took swarms of 10 doctors, and this is Dr. Rosenberg's test. He did this
Hmm.
swarms of 10 or 20 doctors, I can't remember, and they diagnosed the patients. And the correct diagnosis increased by 30% of the swarm of doctors over individual doctors, which means
Hmm.
that if you could have correctly diagnosed a terminal illness that day that could have been saved, 30% more lives would have been saved with a swarm versus
Wow.
individual doctors. And it beat language model AI out in a head-to-head competition. But why though? Because people can use love and empathy. We can also use like negotiations and conflict resolution, which I've actually done. I go into this quite a bit. And I don't want to go too many rabbit holes here because we could be here all day. But I've taken
Yeah.
groups of people that were very far apart and brought them together and had them come up with answers using collective intelligence. And the answers were, to me, some of the most awesome things I've seen so far because you take these two really, really far apart, polarized things that we're told are arch enemies in the world because of their labels. And then you bring them together and go, guys, let's start with the problem. Let's have our
Hmm.
epistemology start with what's the problem we're solving one at a time. Not let's group all of our problems under one label. No, no. Let's take one problem at a time and say, how do we solve this one problem? And the one example I like to use is immigration, because I've done this a couple of times where we take the immigration problem, which is obviously ripping the country in half right now, and you put it through a swarm and you can get answers where 92 to 93 to 95% of the people go, that's pretty fair and reasonable. We do this to this side, we do that to this side. And everyone kind of like, that's pretty fair. And yet our polarizing labels have these answers that are very far apart. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
like when I see things like that, I see things like the creative things of the the reservation system being created by a girl who had only worked for us for 4 weeks, coming, into the system. And I've just seen it so many times now that I have very to me it's it is the most interesting thing in my life. It's the most interesting thing in my life because I've seen it be used so many different. So
Yeah. No, I love all of this. Definitely the links for Swarm Academy, the books that you mentioned, all these other things will be live in the show notes below. I love that, it definitely reinforces the whole perspective of get a second opinion. Don't rely on just one perspective when you're trying to make big decisions or solve big problems. So thank you so much, Josh, for sharing all of this and enlightening us all into this whole idea of collective intelligence.
thanks so much for having me, Danielle. This was great. I really appreciate your platform to kind of share these ideas. It's It excites me, as you could tell, because
Yeah.
it is exciting. I just want to add one more little story at the end here. Something
Yeah.
that you just said that's outside of the realm of businesses. My friend, he just had he needs a very particular kind of heart surgery. He's a big tall man, you know,
Mhm.
and it's very he was at the Cleveland Clinic, and he came out of there, and his friend does this kind of surgeries too. He's like, listen, go get second opinions, 30. So he gets like 5 opinions and then converges on a new answer. And it's just so much better than the original plan when he got it only from one doctor. Now he has like
Mhm.
7, 8 doctors working on it. And it's just like reinforced that he found a way that seems way less risky and way, way better outcomes are possible. And so that wouldn't have happened if he had just trusted only one opinion, right? So I just see
Mhm.
it everywhere in my life, and you can practice it on your own. So if you're listening to this, try it on your own. If you got a problem, if you got a problem, you can bring it to me. Seriously, look me up. I'll help you try to
Yeah.
solve it. And if you don't, if you want to do it with people you trust though, or people in your circle, try it. It works, and
Mhm.
it's testable.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, find a small problem. If you're worried about it being too big, being that vulnerable, try it with a small problem first and see as you start to practice these things, that's how you get more comfortable. That's how you get bolder and more vulnerable. So thank you so much again, Josh.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can talk again about other topics too. So
Yeah, definitely.
thanks again.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.